Your father Alois, a small customs officer, looked at his newborn child and said nothing. You were the fourth child. The other three were already dead. You were probably going to die too. But you didn't die. You survived. Your name is Adolf. Your father didn't love you. You knew this. When you sat at the dinner table, he didn't even look at you. When you spoke, he didn't listen. When you succeeded, he didn't see you. There was only one person who loved you, and that was your mother, Clara, a blonde, quiet, exhausted woman. When you were sick, she never left your side. She was always there, stroking your hair. When you had a fever, she put a wet cloth on your forehead. When you cried in the middle of the night, only your mother heard your voice. You lost her when you were still very young. You were just 18 years old. Your mother had cancer. The doctor was Edward Bloch. He was a Jewish doctor. He took good care of your mother. He did everything he could, but your mother died. When she died, you were devastated, but you didn't cry. You never cried in your life. Crying was weakness. Your father had taught you that. You wanted to go to Vienna. You wanted to be a painter. You drew beautiful paintings. At least that's what you thought. The Vienna Academy of Fine Arts rejected you. Not once, but twice. The jury report said, insufficient drawing ability. After that day, you wandered the streets of Vienna. You stayed in cheap boarding houses. You sold postcards. Sometimes you couldn't find food. At night, you went into shelters to keep warm. Jewish merchants bought postcards from you. They paid you. But something was growing inside you. Was it anger? Was it jealousy? Was it both? You didn't know. In 1914, the war began. For the first time in your life, you felt like you belonged somewhere. The army wanted you. You were genuinely excited. You enlisted in the Bavarian Infantry Regiment. When they put the uniform on you, you looked in the mirror. You didn't recognize yourself. You said, "Is that really me?" And you were amazed. You were brave on the front. Nobody can deny that. You were awarded the Iron Cross twice. Your body took wounds. You didn't want to go back, but they sent you back. Then you heard the news that Germany had surrendered. You heard that news in the hospital. Your eyes had temporarily gone blind. Mustard gas. The doctor came to you. He held your hand. "The war is over," he said. "Germany has been defeated." That night, you cried until morning. For the first time in your life, you cried. But nobody saw it. The Treaty of Versailles, 1919. After this treaty, Germany was handed a bill. When you heard the number, you couldn't believe it. 132 billion gold marks. You read the number again. 132 billion. It would take Germany centuries to pay this. Factories were shut down. Workers were thrown into the streets. Money lost value every single day. In 1923, it took millions of marks to buy a single loaf of bread. People were carrying money to the market in wheelbarrows. You were watching this chaos, and you saw the opportunity. You started with small meetings. You were speaking in beer halls. They were in awe of your voice. You didn't know how, but when you spoke, people listened. Angry people, hungry people, people whose dignity had been trampled. You were giving voice to their rage. You gave them an enemy. That enemy was the Jews. People knew it was wrong, but nobody questioned it. Because when people are hungry, they don't ask questions. They just want to blame someone. In 1923, you attempted the Munich beer hall putsch. It failed. You went to prison. But prison didn't break you. It made you stronger. You wrote Mein Kampf. You put every thought down on paper. How was Germany going to be saved? Who was guilty? Who needed to be eliminated? You had answers. You also had wrong answers. But you had answers. In 1933, you became chancellor. You were 43 years old. The kid who sold postcards was now running Germany. Your first order of business was the economy. And you did this well. Nobody can deny that either. You built highways. You opened factories. You brought unemployment down from 30% to 2%. In just 4 years, Germany got back on its feet. People looked at you. They looked, and they believed. They trusted you. But this miracle was a fake miracle. There was no money. There was no real money. Everything was being done on debt. You were opening weapons factories. You were selling weapons. But one day, you were going to have to use those weapons. Because to pay your debt, you needed land. And you asked yourself one question. You said, "I need a war to fix this economy." In 1939, you invaded Poland. It was over in 2 weeks. Then France. Then the Netherlands. Then Belgium. Every victory made you bigger. Every victory bound the people closer to you. German soldiers were marching through Paris. You were standing in front of the Eiffel Tower. You had your photo taken. It was the best day of your life. But the worst decision of your life was also made in those days. In 1941, you wanted to take Russia. Every single one of your generals was against it. Paulus showed you the numbers. The Soviet army was 5 million strong. The depths of Russia were endless. If winter came, the supply lines would collapse. You waved your hand. 8 weeks, and it's done, you said. 3 million soldiers marched east. In the first weeks, you were right. The Soviets were collapsing, cities were falling, prisoners were coming in by the millions. Then October came. The rain started. Then the snow started. You learned that your soldiers were waiting in trenches in minus 40 degrees in thin jackets. Because you had said it would be done in 8 weeks. Nobody had brought winter clothing. Moscow didn't fall. Stalingrad collapsed. And Germany's economy collapsed. You had spent everything to produce weapons. You were extracting resources from the territories you had seized. You were working the people of the countries you had occupied like slaves. You had sent millions of people to the camps. Every day more blood. Every day more money. Every day you sank deeper into crisis. In 1944, the Allies landed at Normandy. When you woke up, nobody had informed you. Nobody could wake you from your sleep. The 21st Panzer Division couldn't move without your approval. You kept the division waiting in the darkness of the night. By the time you made the decision in the morning, it was too late. Everything was too late. You weren't listening to your generals. You were dismissing them. You were rejecting every single one of their suggestions. As someone with no combat experience yourself, you were managing the fronts from a map. In April 1945, Berlin was burning. You were in the bunker. You were 56 years old, but your face looked much older. You could see your hands trembling. Parkinson's had begun. Eva Braun was by your side. You had loved her. At least you thought you had. You had truly loved very few things in your life. Not since your mother. Above you, the Soviets were advancing street by street. Every cannon blast was getting a little closer. April 30th, the afternoon. Eva took poison. You took out your gun. What was your last thought? Nobody knows. Maybe you thought of the streets of Vienna, the postcards, the rejection. Maybe you thought of your mother, her blonde hair, her wet cloth. Maybe you thought of nothing at all. The trigger was pulled, and history ended. No, history didn't end. 60 million people simply died. Half of Europe was simply destroyed. Millions of families were simply torn apart. The world simply was never the same again. All because of the rage of a postcard seller. All because of a rejection from an academy. All because a father never once looked at his son. The greatest catastrophe in history began like this. Quietly, in a beer hall, with the cry of an angry man. A loud gunshot echoed from the bunker, and you were gone. But Germany was still there. It was burning. It had collapsed, but it was still there. Think of Hans, living in Berlin, 38 years old, a father of 2 children. Before the war, he worked in a factory. Throughout the war, he fought on the front lines. Now he came home. But wait, he had no home. What he found was a destroyed building. The walls were standing, but there was no roof, no kitchen, no bed, just stone and rubble. His wife and children were living in the basement of a neighbor's house. Hans opened the door. He looked at his wife. His wife looked at him. Neither of them said a word, because there was nothing left to say. 80% of the factories had been bombed. Every single railway line was out of service. Bridges had collapsed. Roads had crumbled. Money was completely worthless. $1 American was equal to 4,200 Reichsmarks. In Germany, money had truly lost all its value. But nobody wanted Reichsmarks anyway, because you couldn't buy anything with Reichsmarks. So what were people using to buy things? Cigarettes. Yes, cigarettes had become Germany's new currency. With 1 pack of cigarettes, you could buy bread. With 2 packs of cigarettes, you could get your shoes repaired. With 10 packs of cigarettes, you could buy a week's worth of supplies. When Hans went out into the streets, he saw lines everywhere. Bread lines, water lines, aid lines. People waited for hours. Sometimes by the time you reached the end of the line, the bread was already gone. This is the real economy of history. The people behind the numbers. Always people just like us.